Hello and welcome to another edition of What Does the Giraffe Say Media with me, Kathleen Ratorne. We're an organisation that aims to connect people in conservation by holding live interviews on social media. Today, I am very happy to be joined by Fiona Miles, and she is in charge of Four Paws International in South Africa. So Fiona, if I could hand over to you, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into conservation.
Sure. Hi. Thanks so much for having us, firstly. I suppose I started off being very interested in conservation, but more from a marine biology perspective. I studied a little bit around that and then went into business, and by accident eventually came across Four Paws, which really joined my passion for conservation with the business knowledge that I had gained in the past. And I met the organization, as I mentioned, by accident when they were looking for a place in South Africa to establish a big cat sanctuary, and they needed a business development manager. And that's how I got started, thrown in the deep end with establishing our biggest sanctuary thus far, LIONSROCK, which is based in the Free State, just outside, in Bethlehem in the Free State, in South Africa. And yeah, what an incredible experience and journey to meet incredible people from around the world and the most incredible animal stories, and just so much hope from those stories.
I completely agree. And I mean, the organization itself is so broad. It's across lots of different countries, does lots of incredible things. And I know you're focused mostly on South Africa, and we're going to get a bit deeper into that as we're talking. But for people watching back home who might not know much about Four Paws as an organization, could you talk to us a little bit about what it stands for and the different aspects here?
Sure. We're an international global organization, primarily focused on animals under human control. We obviously aim to reveal animal suffering through various campaigns. We rescue animals from all over the world, and as far as possible bring them to our sanctuaries or create environments in which they no longer have to suffer. And for those animals that are in our sanctuaries, we provide a lifelong home and protect and care for them. So Four Paws has been going for nearly 35 years. We are in countries all over the world. We have more than 14 countries and as many, if not more, sanctuaries for bears, big cats. And we do a lot of work also along companion animals to end the dog and cat meat trade in Southeast Asia. We work a lot on farm animals and, obviously with the many farm animals that are suffering. We aim to encourage really reduction in people's sort of consciousness around the protection of farm animals, and then, of course, wild animals as well. Where in particular, we've worked very hard to end the bile bear trade as well as the big cat trade, yes.
Yeah, we actually had another one of your colleagues on before. We had Amir on when he was talking about the rescue of Kavan the elephant, which was an absolutely incredible story. And if you're watching back home, please do try and check out that, and you'll see some more of a different side of what Four Paws are doing and the work that they do and the determination they have to make animals' lives in captivity better. Now, you've got a campaign around at the minute, and it's called Break the Vicious Cycle, which aims to ban the commercial trade for all big cats in South Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about this trade? What's going on for those who aren't in South Africa and might not really know what's happening there, and why it's so important that it ends?
I think currently there's a global big cat crisis, and South Africa is a country that's really perpetuating that. Over the last 20 years or so, the increase in captive breeding of big cats, and especially lions and tigers, has grown exponentially. It's legal to keep and breed these animals in South Africa for commercial purposes, but not in particular, like you can see in the picture, they're not tigers. Tigers are not meant to be commercially bred nor traded. And what we have found is over the years that there are many people, and so the cycle itself is one where these animals are born into captivity. They are oftentimes hand-raised by unsuspecting volunteers who are brought in to save these animals and provide them a life that they would where volunteers are being told they would go back into the wild. That's not necessarily true at all. They are then pushed through into the tourism cycle, where they could be walked with, can be viewed by tourists, and many of these animals go on to be traded in one way or another, either in trophy hunts, or for their body parts. And it's really shocking that South Africa has now got more than 12,000 lions, and we estimate at least over 1,000 tigers in captive breeding facilities, whereas in the wild, those numbers are very, very small. And we're just allowing this vicious cycle, sort of, as we say, to keep going. And this is what we have to end. There should not be this intensive breeding and intensive farming of big cats, because the animals really are subject to a life of suffering. It's not natural. It's not a natural place for them to be. We see many instances of suffering, where the animals are malnourished, where they sort of don't get the kind of necessary veterinary care that they need. There's a real lack of oversight in terms of the breeding, and so a lot of it can lead to inbreeding or various other medical conditions down the line that we see cause a lot of suffering as well. And so the entire system is a vicious cycle. It needs to sort of end.
And I think you touched on it a little bit there when you were talking about volunteers going. So, these cubs are getting taken away from their natural mother and then being placed, and volunteers are being told that, that they're doing good things by going out there and helping these lions and getting them back to the wild. And none of it's actually very true. How can people, if they're going to South Africa, is there ever a way that's legitimate, or is it always just don't get involved with anything like that at all?
I think any facility that's offering wild animals as entertainment of any sort, so for any sort of wild animal interaction, where you can walk with or pet cubs, or sort of ride on, or anything like that, those are all animals that belong in the wild, that should not have that kind of human interaction, and they are part of this system. There are a number of true sanctuaries, and sanctuaries are facilities that don't breed, they don't trade, they don't allow animal interactions, they certainly obviously don't allow hunting or anything else. And the sanctuary itself would be a forever home and a lifelong home for animals that have come out of abusive circumstances, or trade, or private keeping, or really shocking zoos. And most of the facilities in South Africa that do offer interactions are obviously intensively breeding or participating in that cycle.
So one thing that I was kind of thinking about as well as we've been talking is obviously these lions have been bred for the cubs to be then walked, etc. Then during COVID, there's no walks going on, there's no tourists going on. So what happened to all these babies?
Well, I mean, obviously these are private facilities, so one can't just walk in and see. And if they were closed for COVID, obviously, like any other business, they would have taken a hit. They would have lost tourism income, etc. And so it's a very good question. What did happen? And obviously, there's been a large push for a lion bone export quota from South Africa. And that quota has been put on hold after the High Court in South Africa deemed it necessary that animal welfare consideration should be taken in when these kind of quotas and other things are being set. So it is legal, unfortunately, and this is what we're really pushing hard for through our campaign, is to call on governments to actually ban the commercial trade of these animals and all the components that form part of this cycle.
Because you were touching on it there as well, obviously with the bone trade, and I'm assuming a lot of that is going to Asia. Is that trade legal? What's the setup there?
As far as I understand, yes, it's legal with permits. However, what we found is that a lot of the cases are not registered. None of the documentation or the numbers really tie up with what's being exported and imported. So we do understand that there is a lot of commercial trade, and for instance, tigers may not be commercially traded, and yet South Africa is using the commercial the CITES code for commercial trade. So that in itself is reprimandable from the international community, which should be shouting at South Africa to really implement the CITES regulations, which we are beholden to.
And do you find that the government, the customs, the police, do they take these kind of things seriously? Are you seeing a change of attitude? I know you've been pushing very hard on your campaign, and I've seen some news articles that are saying that things are maybe getting better, but what is actually happening on the ground?
Well, firstly, on the ground, after a sort of a colloquium, a government meeting with all stakeholders, the Minister of Environment put together a high-level panel to investigate the whole thing. A huge report was pushed out, which was then endorsed by our cabinet, and there's the intention of that's been put out there that there will be policy that will see an end and to halt and reverse the domestication of lions, which is a huge step. But policy and these legislative processes and steps take a very long time. And in the interim, what happens to the animals? Yeah. And so that's what we're really calling for, is to say, well, in the interim, whilst there's policy and legislation change that should be coming, there are immediate steps that can be taken to put a moratorium, for example, on breeding, to not allow the trade in bones, etc. So there are definite steps that can be taken in the interim. It's not an industry with so many animals that could just be, magically overnight shut down. This needs to be quite a large task and an undertaking. And I think we need to be supportive on the one hand of the government's decision, but on the other hand, we really need to push and put a lot of pressure on South Africa to fast track this decision, because it's a huge blight on our tourism reputation and our conservation reputation as a country.
And if people back home are watching and they're not based in South Africa, can they still put that pressure on, and how could they do that?
They definitely can. There's on our website, there's our petition, the Break the Vicious Cycle petition. We'd really ask people to sign that, and also, then when visiting South Africa, we would really want people to visit the country and to experience as much of the natural environment as possible, really to see nature as it should be, and not from a quick fix perspective where you can sort of rush through a tour, interact quickly with a little lion cub or a giraffe or a zebra or whatever the case may be, and then sort of go on quickly to the next experience, but rather experience the natural environment the best way possible. So definitely signing our petition, writing to the South African government, which our petition does also encourage. And yes, as I said, just not supporting any wild animal interaction whatsoever.
And we mentioned it as well when we were talking about the fact that there's lions and tigers, and you're doing this for all big cats, essentially. I mean, tigers and jaguars are not even naturally found in South Africa. How come they're coming into this country, and how have they become part of this problem?
Well, what we saw is that there was obviously an uptake over the last years in the number of tiger and other animals. I think in general it was more an attraction until, of course, these animals are no longer populous in their range states. They're no longer available, so to say. It sounds awful, in the countries where they come from. And so not only is South Africa sort of enhancing or topping up the tiger bone demand by using lion bones, but obviously also utilizing tigers, because tigers are not endemic to South Africa, and so they don't necessarily or are not necessarily afforded all the protection that indigenous species would be.
And then the people that are running these organizations, obviously it's a profitable business. They're profiting off these animals. They're profiting off people who are unsuspectingly going into their or when they're doing the canned hunting. pretty sure that's not unexpected. But they're making money, right? So obviously when you're doing these petitions and you're trying to get it shut down, are you then finding that you're getting a backlash from that? And then how do you try and combat that?
The backlash, I think, is more, there's a very strong lobby in terms of the breeders, in terms of the breeding association, in terms of the hunting association. There's a very strong lobby and a very strong global demand. And so we all have to sort of speak as one to say that the demand needs to be reduced, because, as you say, it is a huge amount of money, and there needs to be alternatives that are provided. Excuse me. And this is really on the South African government, as well as the owners of these animals, to step up and to take responsibility for allowing what used to be some hundreds of animals that have been allowed to turn into this sort of thriving business of suffering, and to really, as I said, step up and take responsibility, put legislation in place that protects the animals, that sees them as sentient beings, and for those that own them at the moment, to not continue to breed and to find alternative ways, because it's if you see some of the if you see some of the conditions that these animals are kept in, it's horrific. It's not to say that every single facility is like that, absolutely not, but we should stop this sort of perpetual breeding, because it's these animals have no conservation value at all. They can't go back to the wild, and so we need to start seeing animals differently. We need to start having a look at them from a holistic perspective, from their health and well-being. And certainly, of course, now I think COVID has definitely raised a lot of additional topics, such as the transfer of zoonotic diseases to people. And some of these facilities are potentially have the potential to create those kind of situations, and we definitely don't want that coming from South Africa or anywhere else in the world. So I think it's something that we really need to take care of.
And do you think when you're talking about COVID, obviously I think nearly every country around the world has been affected and had lockdowns at some point or another, do you think people kind of now are looking at animals in captivity and going, I now know how that feels, and you're seeing a bit of a change? Or do you think people are just going to go back to how things were?
I think there's a much higher consciousness, as you say. It's because people have their own feeling themselves, but I think there's also just a higher awareness of that relationship between the natural environment and ourselves, and just how actually precarious that is.
And one of the things your organization does as well, we've been talking about it a lot, is about rescuing these animals in dire conditions in captivity. Now, you recently, there was a big thing on the trained tigers. So if those who are watching back home don't know what the trained tigers are about, you can go a bit more into detail, but I know that they came from South America to South Africa. They'd been in this train for a horrifically long time and was breeding and that kind of stuff. So what was the situation there, and how did you get involved and bring them over to your sanctuary?
Yes, these tigers have been living in sort of an old train wagon. They used to belong to the circus, and subsequently were left on a particular farm where the owner of the farm was taking care of them and looking after them. And obviously their plight, I mean, that sort of situation is completely unnatural for a tiger to live in, where if you saw the surroundings around them, the fields, the open fields and the natural environment around them were just out of reach, just with these bars in between them. And so apparently they lived there for around 15 years, which is really a terrible confinement. I mean, that's a lifetime imprisonment. Yeah. And Four Paws was asked, alongside with other organizations, to assist and support. And we were able to go. And our team, Dr. Amir, that you met previously, who worked with Hwange, him and the great team of the organization, were able to spend some time in Argentina and spend some time with the dogs. Dogs. My apologies, with the tigers. I have my dogs in my head in the background here, hoping that I'm not going to bark. Sorry. So yeah, they spent time with the tigers. They got them accustomed to moving in and out the transport crates. It was a huge logistical thing, because obviously it's not a setup that is anything other than in the middle of nowhere, so to say. So it was a huge logistical effort to train the tigers to walk into those crates, to get them to trust the colleagues, and to ensure that they would be as calm and as stress-free as possible for the very long journey to South Africa. And so when I remember watching the one video, because obviously I wasn't there, but Dr. Amir and the colleagues were, and I saw a bit of the video around where Amir was in the wagon after the tigers had been taken out. And just, one was, if you can think of yourself as a shoe on the other foot, so to say, where if you can go into that space where the animals were living and actually see, it was very moving for me, especially. I really understand, having seen so many big cats in South Africa confined to horrific conditions. My heart was really with Amir in that moment, when he was sort of looking inside that wagon and thinking how it could have been for 15 years. We had a couple of months of lockdown, and what this must have been like for these animals. So they took the long journey to by truck to Buenos Aires, and flew from there to Johannesburg, and then again back onto a truck to Lions-Rock. And when they were released, it's the first time these animals have actually stepped foot on grass. And to see now, it's now a few weeks later, they're adapting so well. They are really a joy, and just seeing how they are adjusting to their new environment is really very heartwarming.
I mean, the contrast to the picture of them on the train and to the picture of them now at the sanctuary just kind of says it all. It just looks so much more natural. They look so much happier. The sanctuary itself, can you talk to us a little bit about this, how that was developed? Can people come and visit? What's the situation there?
Yes, thank you. So LIONSROCK Big Cat Sanctuary, just outside Bethlehem in the Free State of South Africa, is a property around 1,600 hectares in size. So it's a very large property. When we took it over 16 years ago, and this is how I said I got involved by accident a little bit, is that I met Amir. We were looking for a place he was looking for a place to set up a sanctuary, and the organization was looking to establish a place that could really rescue big cats from Europe at the time, which Eastern Europe was going through quite a lot of changes, and there were a lot of zoos that were really run down. This private breeding farm was found, and this used to be a breeding farm, and so one could see really from the inside how poor the standards were, how poor the keeping conditions were. And we were able to take it over and build a sanctuary of the highest quality of care. So we've got huge enclosures, beautiful natural spaces. The animals are not on display. They can hide, they can find shade, they can display natural behaviors. We don't breed, so the animals are sterilized. And over the years, I think we've rescued more than 120 big cats from around the world, including South Africa, where quite a number of animals do come in the sanctuary are from South Africa, and then from all over the world. And yes, people are very welcome to come and visit. We have incredible tours that where people can come along and hear the stories about the individual animals and learn more about them, where they come from, what their conditions were like. And there's a lot of stories of hope, especially with some of the animals that have come from war-torn areas, where they're scared of lightning because of their conditions before, and just to see, I think, how they are now able to display their natural behavior in a way that means that they can be a lion, they can be a tiger once more.
Yeah, it's such incredible work. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. We got a question coming through from Winnie. Hi, Winnie. She's a regular of the show, so always lovely to see her. And she's asking, are tourists still allowed to bottle feed the cubs that are used for canned hunting, or has this all stopped now the truth has been exposed more?
As far as everything goes, it's still allowed. So there are breeding farms that still allow the bottle feeding of the cubs. nothing has changed in that regard, unfortunately, Winnie, and it's really sad. And this is exactly why we need to sort of halt the domestication, and that's why those words in that report that is endorsed by the cabinet now in South Africa are so important, is to halt and reverse the domestication. So part of that halting, we believe, needs to be a complete moratorium on breeding, so that this is not allowed and that we're not perpetuating this behavior, because people do think that it's nice. It is probably, this feeling, or especially if you're told that it's a good thing that you're doing, that you're helping conservation. Yeah. Of course, why wouldn't you? Yeah. And this is needs to come to an end.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, unfortunately, social media can also have a negative effect where people are wanting these selfies with these animals because they are very cute, but they obviously don't. They grow up, and then they're not. They're a lot more dangerous. As well as all the stuff that you're doing for the big cats, I know that you also have another campaign called the Live Kinder for Farm Animals. Can you talk to us a little bit about this? Why South Africa has seen such a boom in factory farms, and kind of what this means for animals, and also the impact it could have on humans as well?
So we have an overall campaign, Live Kinder. And the purpose of our Live Kinder campaign was, especially during the COVID time, was to sort of reach out to the public, to use the opportunity through social media, through reports, through investigations, to raise awareness about the circumstances for animals around the world. And in South Africa, of course, where the images that you see in front of you are not anything extraordinary. And we released a Live Kinder for Farm Animals report specifically to highlight the fact that, South Africa definitely has the opportunity to do things differently, and to move away from factory farming. And of course, the huge demand to feed the population and for cheap food and everything else is, of course, there. The demand is there. But if we can promote alternative methods, alternative means of food production, as well as if we can promote just a reduction in, just sort of to reduce and to minimize our impact, this will make a huge impact on climate as well, because of course the intensive farming of animals is one of the biggest impacts on climate, and of course that circles right back around to us. And so looking at everything from a one welfare perspective, meaning the welfare of animals, the welfare of people, as well as the welfare of our natural environment, is going to become critical if we are going to survive into the future. And so this is why we really wanted to encourage people step by step by introducing these topics and engaging with people. I think now through COVID and through everything else, we've all had to learn to live a little kinder even in small ways, but in everything that we do. And so, yeah, that's a bit more about it.
And there's a comment coming through from Ingrid, hiya, and they're saying, people don't want to see it. They know, but close their eyes for it. And I completely agree. Because it is tough if you've got a family to feed and there's a choice of cheap food or more expensive, more ethical food. What kind of advice would you give for those who do want to make a difference, but might not necessarily have the finances to go for the more ethical sources?
I think to reduce a little bit of, the animal products. And animal products can be reduced across the board because they are introduced into our lives in so many different ways, whether it be in the clothes that we wear, the fashion, the food that we eat. And so it might not always be possible, and that's clearly, understandable. But I think then we need to be putting pressure on the producers, on the government, and demanding better. Because we need to be saying, well, this is, it's our future, and it's what we actually want to see happen in the future is more ethical things, and those are the things that should be made with better prices, and etc. It's just, if we talk about the entire cycle of all the various products that are snuck in. It's just, and yes, there are many tasty alternatives, that's true.
And I think that's the thing. Sometimes you just get stuck in a rut of always eating what you've always eaten, and you do need to sometimes just take yourself out of that and start looking at these alternatives. And it's perfectly easy to have a more sustainable and more ethical diet. We touched on it when we were talking about the lions and the big cat trade and the people being able to talk to the government and trying to stop that. But in other ways, what ways are there for people to support the work that you guys are doing?
Excuse me. So yes, everything from signing pledges, writing to government, signing petitions, writing to I suppose the commercial producers of whether it's food or products. We obviously are completely dependent on donor funding, and so we are very grateful because none of the work that we can do is without the generous support of individuals from around the world who actually, are so vested in some of these topics, and so it's so wonderful that we get that kind of support. So we really appreciate that, and so of course people can go onto our website and make a donation. And I think I suppose just taking on the sort of the whole concept of living kinder as well, relaying the message, giving advice on our website as well. We did a huge range of vegan and vegetarian meals. What do you call it? Recipes, sorry. And yeah, sharing, I think just starting the conversation, sharing with others, encouraging, looking for alternatives is definitely a way to go. So there's a lot that people can do, and I think education is a huge and important issue. And so also asking for, asking for more kinder information and education for our children and our future generations, because we need to protect what we have for them now, and we need to engage with them now so that they know what to do with this planet in the future.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's what you're saying as well, is education is vital and sharing. So please do head over to their social media sites as well. Get involved with that. You'll see all the different information on the work that they're doing. And if you're liking this, please do give it a like, comment, and share. The more people who see it, the more awareness we can raise for the incredible work that these guys are doing. Okay, so I've only got one more question left, Fiona, and I always try and look forward and try and end on the positive side. If you're watching back home and you want to put a question to Fiona, please do just pop it in the comments section and I will do just that. We've had some really lovely comments as we've been talking. Thank you so much for all the support as we've been going. It really is appreciated. So Fiona, what I wanted to ask is what's your thoughts for the future for the organisation? Where do you want to see it? And also, what's your favourite success story?
Sure, it's not a small question. Yeah, I think Four Paws being the animal welfare organisation worldwide for animals that are under human control is, I think, really important. I think we need to look at the big picture, the big issues, the big crises that we're facing right now, whether it's the big cats, which are on a global scale in crisis, whether it's climate and the contribution that we need to make right now in order to see an end to all the suffering of animals, but also just how important that is for our future. And then, of course, as well as some of the larger impacts that we need to make in terms of ending the suffering of companion animals around the world that are being roped into the most horrific situations, such as the dog and cat meat trade. I think we need each and every single person to help us make an impact, and I think that's what we're really trying to do as an organization, is bring everybody along with us. This is a movement that we need to all be on to secure our future. So yes, hopefully in South Africa we also plan to, of course, to increase that awareness and hopefully make a big impact as the government needs to start implementing new legislation, and we really want to be there to support that and make sure that the very best can be done for the animals that are currently in captivity. And of course, the sooner that it happens, the less animals will be in that situation in the future. And then I suppose there's so many stories. Two come to mind. One in particular is a lion that we rescued quite some years ago, and he's passed on now. His name was Caesar. He came from a zoo in Romania, and he was 16 years old at the time, and he was emaciated. He was completely in a terrible condition. It was very difficult to even know if we were able to rescue him. And he did. He came to Lions Rock eventually and lived really a lion's life. He had a mate, a partner, a life partner. He really became the lion he was meant to be after being in a terrible little cage for 16 years. And he lived a good 5 years. He passed away after the age of 20. Strong and proud, and I think that just really makes every day worthwhile to think about that. And then another story I think very quickly was we were able to rescue some elephants some years ago that were captured in Zimbabwe for the elephant back safari industry. And we worked for about 9 months on that project. And I'll never forget the day that we could release them into the wild. And they just stepped back into their natural environments and never took a look back. And I thought that was exactly what should have happened in that moment. So thank you.
They're two absolutely lovely stories. And I'm so pleased that they actually ended up being able to go and be the animals that they should have been in the first place before us humans got involved. So yeah, but as I say, thank you so much for coming on the show, Fiona. I've had some lovely comments, lots of positive feedback as we've been talking. Is there anything that you would like to say before we say goodbye?
I think just thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks so much for the chat. And yeah, please, if everybody can keep following Four Paws and keep up with our work and live kinder every day in everything that we do for people, the planet, and the animals. Thank you.
I think there's nothing I can say to follow on from that. The ending of Live Kinder, I absolutely love. So thank you so much. Please do go ahead and check out their organisation, as I say, on their website, social media, spread the word. They're doing incredible work. So it's really appreciated. And I've absolutely loved having you on the chat. Thank you very much. And to everyone back home watching, thank you for joining in. Thank you for your support and wonderful comments. It's such a lovely community, and I'm always so happy to see all your names and faces popping up as we're talking. But for now, all I'll have to say is enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.